Hey guys, welcome to the channel. This is part 1 of What If Naruto Was High School of the Dead. If you guys enjoyed this what if, then comment, like and subscribe. Let's go. Also the video goal is 10 likes, so let me know that you're interested in the series and you want the next part. Then go ahead and check out the other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave, also share the video with your friends and link in the description. So let's go. Down in a dark alley lied an unconscious blonde man. He looked to be in his teens, mostly around 17. He has long spiky blonde hair that slightly covered his eyes. He has 3 whisker-like marks on each cheek. He wore an orange and black jacket, which was unzipped to show that he wore a black shirt underneath it. He also wore orange pants and black sandals. The blonde's eyes opened to reveal that they were purple-colored and that they had a ripple-like pattern. The blonde sat up and looked around to see blood everywhere, along with dead bodies lying around. Getting back up to his feet, he looked around once again. His eyes were narrow to show that his face shows a bored expression. Where the hell am I? The blonde thought. He walked out of the alley to see several vehicles crashed and on fire. Looking to his left, he saw a school board that said, Fujimi Academy. He saw that the gates were forced open, and as his curiosity caught the best of him, he walked towards the school. A group of people, 2 males and 4 females, were running through the halls throughout the school. One of the students was carrying a metal bat. This student's a boy at the age of 17 with an average height and build. He has brown eyes and spiky black hair. He wore the black school uniform with a red t-shirt underneath. His name's Takashi Komuro. Another student was carrying a wooden sword. Her name's Seiko Busujima, age 18. She has long, straight purple hair with a triangular fringe at the front that barely touched the ridge of her nose. She also had blue eyes and her lips were shiny and pink like sakura blossoms. The next girl was carrying a mop handle. She has long, light brownish hair with bangs and 2 strands sticking out above the rest of her hair. She had reddish eyes and a slender figure with ample breasts. Her name's Rei Miyamoto, age 17. The third girl has long pink hair, which she mostly keeps in 2 ponytails on either of her head. Her hair also has 2 thin, long bangs at the sides, 2 thin strands of hair over the left side of her forehead, and a spiky larger portion of hair covering the left side of her forehead. She has fierce orange eyes and furrowed eyebrows. Her name's Saya Takagi, age 16. Next was the only adult of the group, a tall blonde woman that was carrying a bag full of medical supplies with waist-length hair and hazel eyes along with ridiculous curves. She was wearing a white dress shirt and brown skirt that was ripped at the sides. Her name's Shizuka Marikawa, age 27. The last one of the group was carrying a nail gun. He was a slightly short and chubby boy with shoulder-length dark hair and bangs reaching down from the side of his temples, stretching outwards and obscuring the sides of his face. And of course he was wearing the standard male student uniform of his school. His name's Kota Hirano, age 16. They all came to a stop and got up against the wall. Takashi peeked around the corner to see a small group of the dead just roaming around. He turned back to the group and whispered, "Okay, I'm going to throw something that'll draw their attention so that we can get out of here." He looked at the nurse. "You have the keys, right?" The busty nurse nodded. "Okay." Takashi whispered, as he picked up a shoe that was lying nearby and threw it back from where they came from, which ended up hitting a locker. The dead all picked up the sound and walked towards the source of the sound. Takashi beckoned the group, as they all ran out the doors. Once they all got outside, they all came to a sudden halt. They froze and could not believe what they were seeing. The whole parking lot was overflooded with several of them. Takashi shook it off. "We need to get to that bus." The bus he referred to was not too far from them, but it was blocked by a lot of them. "Come on," Takashi shouted, as he and the others all ran towards the bus. Takashi, Seiko, and Rei managed to make a path by knocking down any that stood in their way. Kota on the other hand was smiling like a madman while he shot any of them from a distance. It wasn't long till they made it to the bus. "Miss Shizuka, the keys." Takashi called out. "All right," she replied, as she opened the door and got in, along with the others except for Takashi and Seiko. The 2 decided to stay out to buy some time for the nurse to get everything ready. Takashi kicked one of the dead back and swung at another one against the head. He spun around to face the one he kicked and swung the bat down on the top of its head. The bus powered on, which gave them the word that they were ready to get out of here. "Takashi, they're ready. Let's go." Seiko said, as she whacked her wooden sword across the head of one of them. You go, ladies first. He said. Seiko smiled slightly and quickly got on the bus, followed by Takashi. Wait for us. Takashi looked out the door to see a group of people running towards them. Who's that? Takashi asked. That's Mr. Shido, the teacher of Class 3A. Seiko answered. Rei's eyes widened. Shido. She said quietly. We can go now. Shizuka announced. Wait just a bit longer. Takashi replied. Rei quickly looked at Takashi. They're in front of us. Any more and we won't be able to drive through here. Shizuka said. Just run them down. Takashi stated. Saya folded her arms across her chest. If any more crowd around in front of the bus and we were to run them over, it might just flip the bus. Saya mentioned. Takashi gritted his teeth and made his way to the exit. However, Rei quickly grabbed his arm. We don't have to save him. She said. Takashi stepped out and looked at Rei. Jesus. What do you mean we don't have to save him? We don't have to help him. He deserves to die. Rei shouted. They're alive and no one deserves to die. Takashi barked back and turned back around to look outside. However, he looked at a different area and saw a blonde boy around his age. Who's that? Everyone looked at what Takashi was looking at. I don't know. I haven't seen anyone wearing clothes like those around the school. Seiko answered. The blonde watched the group of people running to the bus. Then he realized that two of them were behind. One, which looked like the leader to him, was standing and looking down at an injured student. Then, the leader of that group kicked down at the student's face and left him, as he made his way to the bus. The blonde kept that same bored look on his face, as he looked at the student that was left behind and saw that a few of the dead were closing in on him. He slid a metal rod through his jacket sleeve and instantly vanished. The people at the bus were completely shocked. What the hell? Takashi asked. No one had a clue what to say. Let's go, we need to get out of here. Shido called out. Takashi shook his head. Not yet. They looked at the defenseless student, but then they saw the blonde appear right next to his side. The blonde grit his teeth and hefted the boy up along his shoulders. He could literally smell the breath rolling off the dead students at the close of a distance. The dead lunged at the blonde, but he ended up stabbing the rod through the head of one. The others grabbed onto the blonde. Shinra Tensai. He muttered quietly. Only the boy on his shoulders would have effectively hurt it. It was then that the 6 creatures that had come to surround the two were viciously blown back. This wasn't the please move from the doorway Shinra Tensai as he liked to call it, such as the one he used earlier against the abomination in the school. This was a full-fledged, bone-crushing, organ-melting forceful push that was used for combat. The creatures rocketed off in all directions. The amount of force shown to all of the onlookers is over in the bus. One of the monsters had propelled right into the school. One of them ended up slamming hard against the constructed walls, impacting with enough force to make an actual crater in it. Another creature blew off in another direction, rocketing at the fence before springboarding face first crashing into the cement. What on earth was that? Rei asked. Shido and his group witnessed of what happened, and even Shido himself was lost for words. They all kept their eyes on the blonde, but then he vanished once again and ended up reappearing before their very eyes. The blonde stood outside the bus, while Takashi quickly helped the injured student in the bus. He sat him down in the seat behind Shizuka and looked down to see the blonde just standing there. Get in. The blonde looked behind him to see several of them coming and decided to get in the bus. Once he stepped in, the doors shut, while Shizuka stared at the horde in front of them. They're not human anymore, she said to herself and finally pushed down on the pedal, as she began to run them over. Naruto stood at the front of the bus and looked at everyone, but then his eyes came to a stop on the man that tried to kill one of the students. He walked towards him slowly, while Takashi and his group, except for Shizuka, along with the injured student that was saved by the blonde, watched him. Shido sat in his seat and had fear showing in his eyes. The blonde continued to make his way to him, but then a student from the other group got up from his seat and stood in front of the blonde. This student has brown and yellow hair, wears the male Fujimi High School uniform, and unlike the other students, he wears slippers instead of regular shoes. Under his uniform he wears a blue high-collar sweater that is unbuttoned slightly. His name's Sonoda, age 17, go sit down. He yelled. The blonde, as usual, kept that bored look on his face and didn't say a word. I said go sit d. The blonde grabbed the student by the face and lifted him up off his feet, as he looked up at him. Some of the people gasped and were completely surprised about this boy's strength. The way he simply lifted Sonoda up with one hand by the face was not normal by any other student. He didn't say anything and instead, he simply tossed him back to his seat and walked up to Shido. The teacher was starting to shake in fear, as the blonde stopped right next to him. He looked closely at him to realize how long his hair was, which managed to cover his eyes slightly. However, Shido managed to see his strange eyes. "W, who are you?" "And W, what are you?" he stuttered. The blonde grabbed the collar of the teacher's shirt and lifted him out of his seat. Shido grabbed hold of the blonde's wrist and struggled to get free, but the blonde's grasp was too strong. "If you ever try to leave anyone behind again, I'll kill you," the blonde stated. Shido's eye widened, but was placed back in his seat roughly. The blonde turned back to see that all eyes, except Shizuka's, were on him. "My name's Naruto Namikaze. That's all you need to know," the blonde said, as he walked back to the front of the bus and sat down next to the student he saved. Shido saw that all eyes were on him now. Everyone, even his own group, was disgusted with him leaving a poor student behind. Shido's group consisted of 9 people, 6 males and 3 females. Sonoda, Shido himself, and Kaji as well, but who knows if Kaji wants anything to do with him anymore. Kawamoto, age 16, is one of the girls from Shido's group. She's a red-headed girl with golden brown eyes. She has only been seen wearing the female uniform of Fujimi Academy. Under her uniform, she wore a pink tank top. Taniyuchi, age 16, is another girl from Shido's group. She has magenta-colored hair and blue eyes covered by a pair of glasses. She has always been seen wearing the female sailor uniform of Fujimi Academy. Miura, age 17, is a male student from Shido's group. He has messy brown hair as well as eyes of the same color. Under his Gakurin jacket, he wears a red-orange shirt. Yamada, age 18, wears a long white-sleeved shirt. He has short black hair and light brown eyes. Kurokami, age 17, has long black hair that grows over his eyes. He does not wear the black uniform jacket over a long-sleeved white shirt. Unlike most students with these shirts, he wears his untucked. Yuki Miku, age 18, has short light orange hair and uses a hair band to keep her hair back. She also wears the female uniform of Fujimi Academy. She was known to be the sexiest student throughout the school. Naruto grabbed the medical bag that was sitting on the ground and opened it. "What's your name?" Naruto asked. The boy replied with a stiff lip, "Kaji Saito." He answered in a deal of pain. Seiko was sitting on the opposite side of the bus from Naruto and a couple seats back. She watched him and admired his work. "Busujima-san, I'm assuming you're the leader of your group." Seiko turned around and looked up to see Shido asking her. She also noticed that Shido was keeping a close eye on Naruto at the same time. "No. We just worked together." "That's no good. Every group needs a leader in order to survive," he replied. Rei tightly grabbed Takashi's arm and glared at him. "You'll regret saving him," she whispered. "It's like I said. It's only going to be dangerous if we keep going. What if we run out of gas in the middle of nowhere? What are we going to do then? Why don't we find a safe place?" Sonoda shouted, as he stood in the aisle. Kurokami nodded. "I agree with Sonoda. We should just find a safe place with food and drinks to keep us alive for a few days and barricade ourselves inside." The bus came to a screeching halt and nearly threw Sonoda off his feet, but he held onto a chair to hold his ground. "That's enough. I can't focus on driving with all of this commotion," Shizuka shouted. "Yeah, whatever," Sonoda said. Naruto examined the 2 hair-colored teen and saw that this guy was on the verge of a mental breakdown. "Tell me, what is it you want to do then?" Seiko asked the teen. Sonoda gritted his teeth. "I just can't." He then pointed at Komuro. "I just can't stand him." Komuro got out of his seat. "What did I ever do or say to you?" Sonoda lost it. "You bastard." He charged at the teen. The scene before the blonde started to remind him of an old friend of his. However, it was over when Rei got up and hit him hard in the stomach with the mop handle. "Asshole," she muttered. Clapping drew everyone's attention, as they all saw Mr. Shido now standing. "Bravo," he began. "That was outstanding teamwork, Komuro-kun and Miyamoto-san. However, at any rate, a conflict such as this only serves to prove my point." He grinned. As he leaned forward to the two shorter teens, we need a leader. Oh, so we've only got one nominee? Saya asked. The teacher looked at the young girl. I'm a teacher, Miss Takagi. And you are all my students. Shido looked at Naruto and the nurse, except for your nurse and him. He said. So, that alone makes it very clear who's more qualified. I'll make sure we all survive. Naruto gave the man some props since he did have some deal of charisma. However, he knew that this man was dangerous. He knew that if it came down to a situation similar to him and Kaji back at the school, that he would kill whoever was in his way. Shido's group stood up and clapped at his pointless speech. I suppose that it's decided that I'm the leader from now on, by majority vote. Rei was just about to get up and leave, but before she did, she watched as Naruto got up. The blonde held his arm up in front. Bansho Tenin, he whispered, as Shido came flying towards the blonde. Everyone went wide-eyed seeing more of the blonde. Naruto caught him by the neck and slid another metal rod from his sleeve. If anyone should be leader here, it's defiantly not going to be you. He said in a cold tone. Shido struggled once again in the blonde's grasp. Seeing that Naruto got his statement through, he thought that was enough and simply tossed him back to the back of the bus. Seiko for once showed the slightest of fear in her eyes. Just what is he? Where did he come from? Takashi began to wonder. Kota on the other hand was in fact smiling. He's like some badass from some manga. I want Naruto as my leader. Kaji announced. The blonde looked at the student he had saved. I also want Naruto as our leader. Kota said. Before anyone else could say anything, Naruto shook his head. I'm afraid I cannot lead you all. Kota stood up. Why not? Naruto couldn't come up with an answer and he didn't want to tell them exactly why. I vote for him. The blonde pointed at Takashi. Hey, why won't you want to be the leader? Saya asked. Yeah, the way you saved Kaji and how you easily took care of those dead students. You should take up on the position. Takashi said. Kamuro's right. Seiko mentioned. Naruto just stood there, while everyone started to say things about him and how he fits being the leader. It was too much for him, as his head started to ache. He placed a hand on his head, as his head began to get worse due to memories of him being back in his world came to him. So, who's going to lead our group? Ambushing Kabuto isn't going to be easy. Sai said. Tsunade sat at her desk, as she looked at Sai, Sakura, and Kiba. I have already decided who's going to lead. Right when she said that, the door opened to show Naruto wearing an Anbu outfit. Naruto. Why didn't I think of that sooner? Kiba asked himself. Naruto here will lead you, but please do remember, you four are to capture Kabuto alive and bring him back so we can get more information about Madara out of him. This is an S-ranked mission. Yes, Lady Hokage. Kiba and Sai said. Naruto was smiling. This is what I've been waiting for. Missions like these to sneak in and capture the enemy. He smiled sheepishly, while Sakura punched the top of his head. The blonde squat down and rubbed his head. Baka. This is nothing to be joking about. Sakura, why do you always have to hit my head? He whined. Naruto fell to one knee, which everyone from Takashi's group got up to their feet and rushed to him. Naruto-san, are you okay? Seiko asked. The blonde showed no sign of answering and shortly went unconscious. We need to find a place for him to rest. Takashi mentioned. Oh, we can go to my friend's home. It's not too far from here. Shizuka mentioned. Okay, then can you take us there? Takashi asked. Shizuka nodded and got back in the driver's seat, as did everyone else, while Seiko grabbed the unconscious blonde and pulled him with her to a seat. She sat next to the window and placed his head in her lap, even though his legs bent down the side of the chair and rested in the aisle. She looked down at his face and looked closely at the whisker marks. You're obviously hiding something from us, Naruto-san. Shido looked down the bus at Seiko's position. Hey boss, he's out cold. Sonoda whispered, as he took a seat next to him. Yes, I know. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Yes, when we get to Ms. Marikawa's friend's home, we will kill him when he's resting. Naruto stood across from the last member of the Akatsuki, Madara Uchiha. The two of them were both exhausted and pretty beaten up. You have two things that belong to me, boy. The Nine Tails and the Rinnegan that Nagato gave you. I'm still shocked that he sacrificed himself to bring back those that he killed back to life. One of the wounds on Naruto's chest began to bleed again, which caused him to fall on one knee. His body began to feel a little light due to all the blood he was losing. I will protect this world, and I will. He got back up to his feet slowly, keep my promise. Madara looked at Naruto's Rinnegan eyes, and saw that the blonde held his arm out in front, Bansho Tenin. He said, as Madara's body came flying to him. Naruto held out his other arm, as a Rasengan formed in his hand. When Madara was in reach, Naruto slammed the Rasengan, but it ended up going right through Madara. The blonde stumbled forward a bit, but kept his Rasengan formed. He turned around to see Madara with his Susanoo summoned. Susanoo raised its fist up. Nagato, the blonde thought, as his Rasengan began to change color. Konan-chan, it began to grow bigger within his palm. Pervy Sage, it was no longer blue and instead, took on a mixture of crimson and black colors. Naruto charged at the protected Madara, while Susanoo attempted to punch the blonde. I will keep my promise. The two attacks closed in. The nine tails is mine. Madara shouted. Naruto held out his Rasengan, Mata. Naruto's eyes shot open, as his body shot up on its own. He was breathing heavily and looked around to see that he was in a small room. He looked down to see that he was covered up by a white blanket and lying on a pallet. Looking around one last time, he realized that there was nothing else in here. He leaned forward and looked down the sheet. How did I end up in this world? He quietly asked himself once again. He threw the blanket off him and got up to his feet. He then heard a thump sound just outside the door and walked up to it. Turning the knob, he opened the door to see Shido sitting on the ground along with Sonoda right next to him and Seiko standing in front of them. The three of them looked at Naruto to see that same bored look on his face, while Seiko smiled. You're up. Are you feeling better? Shido and Sonoda began to sweat like crazy seeing that they were now sitting in between Seiko and the blonde. Yeah. What's going on here? He asked. These two were trying to sneak in. Seiko answered. Sonoda and Shido shot up to their feet. No, we were just wanting to come in and check on you. Sonoda said. Seiko cocked an eyebrow. Then why were you two whispering when coming over here? Shido shrugged and turned to face Seiko. Why Busujima-san, to simply not wake him up of course. Naruto rolled his eyes and had enough of hearing them. He shoved the two men aside and walked past Seiko, but stopped behind her. Thank you. He said, as he continued. Seiko smiled and followed him back to the living room. Once the two were out of sight, Shido banged the wall. Damn it. Busujima-san is onto us. What now? Sonoda asked. We'll just have to wait for a good chance. Naruto walked into the living room to see Takashi and Kota trying to force open a safe. Just before Seiko could join him, she was pulled aside by Rei and Saya. It's our turn to use the bathroom to freshen up. Rei said. Seiko looked back at Naruto then back at the two. I was going to. You can talk to him later. You need to clean up anyway. Saya said, as they dragged Seiko to the restroom. Naruto plopped down on a nearby chair and watched the two boys try to break open the safe. Come on Kamuro. Kota said, while Naruto sat there watching the two trying to break open the safe. Seiko, Rei, Saya, and Shizuka all stripped down their last clothing. Rei and Shizuka stepped into the warmed-up tub and sank in, as a moan escaped their lips. Seiko and Saya sat on a bench that was placed in front of a mirror. Sensei, they're so big. Rei announced. Yes, I've been told that a lot of times. She replied, as she grabbed her breasts. Rei just watched the nurse play with her breasts. Shortly after, the teen growled, then with a large splash, pounced on the older female grabbing her large chest and squeezing it tightly in her hands, gaining a loud moan from the teacher. Saya washed her hair, while enjoying the warm water. This is what I needed. No more. Shizuka moaned, as Rei continued to play around with her large breasts. Sheesh, I think Rei's being a bit abusive. Saya mentioned, as she quickly glanced at the comical scene. I still don't understand why we have to take showers together. Seiko glanced at her as she washed her long slender arms. You already know the answer to that, Takagi-san. The violet-haired beauty commented. Yeah, but still. She was silenced, as a blast of cold water assaulted her sensitive skin. Ugh. She moaned loudly, her voice becoming hot at the sudden contact, as she ducked her head down a bit. Wow, your voice is more attractive than I thought. You must drive the guys crazy. The older girl commented with a small chuckle. Saya glared at the older girl, as she filled a tub of cold water, then she quickly dumped it down Seiko's back. The violet-haired beauty gave a soft and quiet moan at the sudden contact. She sounds more womanly. Saya thought, as she gazed at the older teen with a stupefied expression. Suddenly, it became awkwardly quiet. They all began to think about what they should talk about next. Then one of them had a mysterious topic. What do you think of Naruto-san? Ray asked. Shizuka pursed her lips. Now that you mention it. I'm also curious about him. Saya nodded. I've never seen him at school or anywhere around town. I'm wondering where exactly he's from. That too. But I'm more curious about his abilities. Seiko mentioned. You're right. Did you see how he blew back a few of them back at school? That's not normal. Ray said. Yeah. And his clothing is strangely odd. Saya mentioned. No normal being can do that. What if he's not from this planet? Shizuka asked. Do you think we should ask him? Ray asked. I want to know more about him if he's going to be around us. Saya said. Seiko nodded in agreement. She's right. We know everyone in our group pretty well, except for Naruto-san. Okay then. So, we'll all. Shizuka was interrupted, as Ray once again attacked her breasts. Shizuka moaned out loudly. One more time, Kota said, as the two of them pulled on the crowbar, which seemed to do the trick, as the safe was forced open. Takashi fell backwards, while Kota looked inside and started to drool, as Sparkles lit his eyes after seeing all the guns, a Springfield M1A1 Super Match Huh. It's only semi-automatic though. That's perfect. The M14 series is fully auto. This is less wasteful when it comes to ammunition. His grin grew in size. This is a 20-round magazine. This is fucking illegal in Japan. He laid the gun down softly and reached for the other one. Oh hell yes. A Knight's SR equipped with a scope. He stated. Wait no, you can't get that kind of thing in Japan. So it must be an Arkansas 10 that was modified from top to bottom. He cried loudly, there's even a crossbow here. Naruto tilted his head and walked to the safe. He bent down and grabbed one from the safe. What's this? The blonde asked, as he pulled out a big gun and stood straight up. Kota looked at the gun and instantly squealed. That's an Ithaca M35 riot shotgun. It's a badass shotgun designed by the Americans. Really popular during the Vietnam War. Takashi grabbed a silver handgun with 2 extra clips and an adjustable barrel and pointed it at Kota, who started to freak out. Yo, Kota. What's this? He asked. The shorter boy grinned. That my dear friend is one of the most popular pistols. The Desert Eagle Mark 19, it lets you switch between all 3 calibers. He finished. Naruto examined the shotgun that he held and placed down with the other guns. I have no use for whatever these things are. Kota went wide-eyed. You don't know what guns are. Naruto looked at the shorter boy. No, he stopped, as he started to remember when he was only 13 and remembered the mission him and his team were on back in the snow country. The guards there wore chakra armor and used guns that fired kunaises. He closed his eyes. Never mind. He said, as he walked out of the room to leave the two messing around with the weapons. Stopping at the entrance, he looked back at the two to see that Takashi was listening to every word Kota was saying about the weapons. The blonde blinked once and then felt a pair of arms around his neck, but not just that. He could smell the scent of liquor. Turning around, he saw Yuki wearing a black and red lace bra with black panties. She also had a faint blush on her cheeks. Naruto-kun. She moaned. You've been drinking, haven't you? The blonde asked. Yuki smiled. No. Naruto blinked once and was starting to get annoyed. Where's Shido and the others? Yuki placed her right hand on his chest and slid it down to his pants. Before she slid her hand into them, the blonde quickly snatched her wrist. Where are they? Yuki giggled slightly. Why don't we have some fun? As she used her other hand to slide up his shirt and feel his hard abs. Oh my. She said. Seiko came from around the corner with a towel wrapped around her body, as she tied her hair with a ponytail and saw a drunk Yuki hitting on the blonde. She realized that she wasn't seen yet and decided to watch what would happen. Naruto grabbed her other wrist with his other hand and brought her hands in front of her body. Where are they? He asked once again. Yuki frowned. You're an asshole. They're downstairs. Naruto let go of her and walked right past her, and when he did, he saw Seiko standing there. The towel she had wrapped around her hugged tightly around her body and showed her luscious curves, not to mention that it showed a good amount of her cleavage. He stopped in front of her and noticed that her hair was different. Naruto-san, can we? Not now, he said, as he walked past her. She turned around with a sad frown on her face and saw that he was headed for the stairs. Naruto came to the only room that was downstairs and could hear music playing inside. He opened the door and saw the rest of Shido's group inside. The scent of liquor roamed around the room and he was disgusted of what he was seeing. He saw Taneuchi completely naked sucking Sonoda's hardened cock, while being fucked by Miura. His eyes glanced a few feet to the right of them to see Kawamoto completely nude as well. She was sucking on Yamada's cock, while Kurokami was fucking her. The blonde walked in and spotted Shido sitting in a chair completely knocked out. Naruto came to a stop and looked at the group of guys each being pleasured or pleasuring the girl. Get up. Everyone except Shido were startled, as the blonde stared at the girls. Put your clothes on. Taneuchi and Kawamoto nodded and quickly put their school uniforms back on, while the guys pulled their pants back up quickly. Naruto looked over at Shido to see that he was still out. The blonde held his arm out in front. Bansho tenin, he said, as Shido's body was now in the blonde's grasp. That's all you have to say? Sonoda asked. The boy with two different colors in his hair held his arm out in front and had his hand face the blonde. Bansho tenin, he said, but nothing happened. Sonoda looked at his arm then up at Naruto with a dumbfounded look on his face. Naruto grinned and held out his other arm. Bansho tenin, he said, as Sonoda was now in the blonde's grasp as well. You're a funny one. Sonoda grabbed the blonde's wrist. Let me go. Shido's eyes opened and saw that he was being held in the air by Naruto. What the hell? Naruto looked at Shido. Ah, it's good to see you up. What's going on? The teacher asked. You and your group are going to leave now. What? Why? Miura jumped in. I don't want mindless people in my group. What if we refuse? Miura asked. Naruto grinned, as he dropped both Sonoda and Shido and performed a few hand signs. Everyone had no clue what the blonde was doing, but then the blonde slammed his hand on the ground, as he acted like he grabbed something from beneath the floor. He pulled his hand up, as a perfectly clean and sharp sword came out from under the floor. Once he pulled it out from below, he whipped the sword to his side. Then allow me to go ahead and end your lives here. Shido and his group were beginning to panic that the blonde was willing to kill them all if they refused to leave. Naruto lifted the sword up and pointed the very tip of it right in between Shido's eyes. So, what's it going to be? Naruto turned his head to the door after hearing gunshots from above. He snapped his head back and glared at Shido. You all stay here, he said coldly, as he left the room. Naruto ran into the living room to see the door to the balcony opened and heard another gunshot. He quickly ran out the door to see Kota shooting down at the streets. The blonde looked outside to see several of the dead walking toward some home not too far from their position. His eyes locked onto what they were after and saw Takashi fighting off a few of them trying to protect a little girl that seemed to be around 7 years old. Not just that, but there was a little dog with them and kept barking, which kept drawing the walkers' attention. I'll use the term walkers every now and then, which refers to the zombies. Damn it, Naruto said to himself, as he vanished in an instant. Kota didn't react to the blonde's actions and focused on protecting Takashi and the girl. Naruto appeared right in the middle of the horde, but they were still going after Takashi and the girl. The blonde placed his thumb and pointy finger in his mouth and whistled loudly. The horde all came to a stop, while Takashi smashed the head of one with his bat. Then he realized that they stopped coming after him. The horde all turned to the blonde's direction and all started going after him. Takashi didn't quite see who it was, but knew that this was their chance to get out of here. He held his hand out to the little girl. Come on, we're getting out of here. The little girl wiped her tears. But, what about daddy? She sobbed. Takashi looked at the girl's father lying there in blood. His eyes narrowed, as he grabbed a sheet that was hanging on a wire and placed it over his body. Looking around once more, he saw a few flowers and picked 2 purple flowers, as he gave one to the little girl. They walked up to the girl's father and both placed a flower on his body. They stood there for a few seconds, but then seeing that they were there long enough, Takashi held out his hand to the little girl again. Let's go. The little girl nodded, as she grabbed his hand. Takashi walked out of the yard and saw a clear path back to the house. They picked up the pace, hurrying to get back, while the dog was close behind. Naruto was slicing heads off of the walkers one by one. Every time he thought he was getting close to being done, More just kept appearing before him. Damn it, they just keep coming. He sliced the head off of another one, but one grabbed his jacket from behind and started to pull him. Naruto struggled, but then he slid his arms out of his jacket, letting his jacket being taken. The blonde fought back the walkers, as he looked to see that Takashi and the little girl, along with some dog, finally reached the gate. He saw that the gate opened and that they made it back inside. Once they were in, the gate quickly closed, which caused the blonde to smile weakly. Swinging the sword in a full 360-degree spin, several heads of the walkers flew up in the air. Blood splattered all over his body, as some of it also managed to get on his face. He looked around again and saw that they were just not letting up, as more and more just kept coming. Looks like I won't be able to get any sleep tonight, he said to himself, as he looked up at the moon. Naruto fought against an army of Zetsus and saw that Sakura, Sai, and Kiba were getting tired. He remembered that their mission was to ambush and capture Kabuto. If they kept going on like this, they wouldn't be able to complete the mission. You three go on ahead. I'll handle all of them, Naruto shouted. They all looked at the blonde. Are you crazy? There's way too many, Kiba yelled. Kiba's right, Naruto, you can't just take them all on, Sakura said. The blonde's lips formed into a small smile. Don't worry. Just go and complete the mission. We can't, Naruto. We're not going to leave you behind, Sakura continued. Naruto looked at Kiba, which the Inuzuka looked closely in the blonde's eyes and saw that Naruto wasn't playing around. Kiba nodded, as he grabbed Sakura's arm. Come on, he yelled, as Sakura began to run with Kiba by force, while Sai was close behind. Naruto, Sakura screamed, as she saw all the Zetsus closing in on the blonde. However, she saw that sheepish smile on his face and saw that he was waving at them. A pain struck the blonde's head. Damn it. Not now, he said to himself, as he sliced the arms off of the walkers that were near him. He fought back the memory and remained on his feet, as he managed to grab the incoming hand from one of the walkers. He held onto it tight and swung his sword up, which cut that arm off. Naruto was starting to get annoyed with this and vanished, as he reappeared a few yards away from whence he stood. Several heads flew up in the air again, as blood shot up like a fountain. He looked around once again and saw that they just kept coming at him. Takashi and the rest of his group went back into the living room, as they walked toward the balcony deciding to see how it looked outside. They could still hear Kota shooting at them. Kota, how's it looking? Takashi asked, as they joined in. Not good. They just keep coming, the short boy answered. Seiko, now wearing nothing but an apron and a black thong, looked around back inside. Where's Naruto-san? He's down there somewhere, Kota answered. Yeah, when I went to save the little girl, I heard a loud whistle, but I couldn't find out who it was. But it has to be Naruto since you said that he's down there, Takashi said. Rei's eyes widened. Then shouldn't we go help him? Rei was no longer wearing her school uniform, and instead, she wore her pajamas, which she wore a tight light pink-colored tank top and white panties. Kota shook his head. I don't think we should. It's more likely that we'll just get in his way. However, a new presence joined in with the group. You all should just get some sleep. They all turned to see Naruto. Wait, how did you? Takashi couldn't finish his question. I'm just a clone. He's still down there fighting. He summoned me just so I can come tell you all to get some rest, the clone of Naruto said. Everyone was once again shocked seeing something new about this blonde. So he can make clones? Rei asked. Kota's eyes sparkled. He truly is some badass from a manga. The clone of Naruto chuckled and puffed away. There's a lot to be discovered by him. When he gets back, we defiantly need to have a talk with him, Takashi mentioned. They all nodded in agreement. Kota yawned. Let's just all get some rest and hope that everything's going to be alright with Naruto, Takashi said. They all nodded, as they walked back inside, except for Seiko. She looked down at the street covered by hundreds of the walkers. Scanning the area, she couldn't find the blonde anywhere. Please be careful, she whispered to herself. The purple-haired beauty turned around and saw a grinning Rei. Does Busujima-san have a little crush on Naruto-san? Seiko blushed slightly. Is that why you're wearing that outfit? So you can get his attention and have some time with him alone, Rei continued. Seiko's blush darkened. No. I just wanted to ask him some questions. Rei smirked and walked around Seiko, as she checked her back out. Then why would you wear an outfit that's so revealing? It looks to me that you just want to draw his full-on attention. Seiko couldn't take it anymore and walked back inside, leaving a laughing Ray behind. Few hours later, 2:47 a.m. Naruto somehow ended up out of sight from the house and couldn't recall how it happened. He just kept decapitating those that kept closing in on him. Looking behind him, he saw that their numbers started to decrease. A smile came upon his face. Looks like I might get some sleep after. He swung his sword vertically upward on one of them, which ended up cutting the entire body in half, all. During his long time of fighting, the blonde's pants managed to get torn below his knees. His shirt had small little rips here and there, but it still managed to cover up his body. However, his entire body managed to get covered in blood by those he cut down. The last few remaining walkers came up to the blonde and all lunged at him. Naruto grabbed one by the neck and slammed it on the ground, as he stabbed it in the head. He then ducked to avoid the walkers, grasps and spun a full turn, as he sliced their bodies in half. Blood showered down on his body, which he stood straight back up. His eyes remained narrowed the entire time he was out here and as usual, had that bored look on his face. Looking around one last time, he saw hundreds of the walkers' bodies lying on the street. Something came up in his head, and so he grabbed a couple bodies at a time and began to make a wall with the bodies. An hour later, all the bodies that were once covering the street were now piled up in a giant wall. One wall blocked the path from where they all came from, while the other wall blocked the path that would take them out of this neighborhood. However, he heard a low groaning sound coming from behind him. Quickly turning around, he saw an unfamiliar-looking one. This one was once a living girl. She has long messy blonde hair. Now that she's dead, her neck was rather long and her jaw was broken. Naruto held the sword out in front with the tip pointed at the forehead of the last one. "Just how did you get in here?" the blonde asked. The walker opened its mouth and spat out acid, which made contact with the blonde's eyes, which shut in an instant. Naruto's body shivered, as he dropped the sword and fell to his knees. His hands covered his eyes, as they began to burn terribly. He screamed out in pain, as the acid prevented him from opening them. The strange walker grabbed the blonde, and just before it was going to bite down on his head, Naruto grabbed the sword and quickly swung up at it vertically, which managed to cut the entire body in half. The blonde's weapon fell from his grasp and hit the ground once again. His eyes were still shut and were burning badly still. What the hell was that? He asked himself. Naruto. The blonde heard a feminine voice, but he couldn't see who it was. He tried to open his eyes, but they just wouldn't due to how bad they were burning. Damn it. He shouted. Hang on. Naruto felt himself being helped up to his feet and that his left arm was around someone's shoulders. Time. 3:58 a.m. Naruto was now sitting on a bed with the same girl that brought him back inside. She managed to wipe up all the blood off his face with a towel. She sat behind him on the bed and began to wrap his eyes with bandages. "You seem to always surprise us, Naruto-san." The blonde sat there and still couldn't recognize the voice. If only he had spent more time with the others, he might have figured out who this was. "I'm just doing what it takes to keep people alive," he replied. Then the blonde remembered. "Why aren't you asleep?" "I was too worried," she answered, as she finished tying the bandage. She maneuvered herself to where she was now sitting in front of him and facing him. She saw through his bandaged-covered eyes that he cocked an eyebrow from her answer. "Please don't," he said. "Why?" she asked. "Because I don't know how much longer I'm going to stick around." "Wait," she grabbed the bottom of the blonde's shirt, which he could tell she was trying to remove it. He raised his arms up, which she then pulled it off of him. "You plan on leaving us?" The girl's eyes locked on with the blonde's topless body. She saw his tanned skin and his well-framed 8-pack cheesy. "I know," along with his chiseled chest. The girl blushed lightly. "Well, before I go any further, whom am I speaking to?" "Seiko." "Well, whether you believe me or not, I'm not from around here." Seiko tilted her head a bit. "What do you mean?" "I'm not from this world." Seiko grinned slightly. "Well, some of us began to think that since the way you fight isn't normal." Naruto kept his head up, acting like he was looking at her, even though he couldn't see her. "Well, I'm from a place called the Elemental Nations. To be exact, the Fire Country in the village of Konoha." Seiko looked at the temporarily blind blonde. "Well, what's it like?" "A lot different. Everything in this world has a lot more technology compared to mine. We don't have whatever it was we were in when we first met. Those guns Kota found are way advanced than what I've seen in mine. Also, the people here are a lot weaker compared to the people from my world. Naruto answered completely honest. Seiko frowned at his last comparison. I'm not trying to say it offensively. It's just that in my world, everyone's at war with each other. The majority portion of the population trained to become shinobi, or ninja I guess I should say from their childhood. He explained to her. Seiko pursed her lips and blinked once, as her left eyebrow rose. So you're saying you're a ninja? Naruto held out his arm with his hand open between the two, as a ball of chakra formed in the palm of his hand. Seiko looked at the mysterious ball that formed in his hand and saw how beautiful it looked. Just the color of it made her like it, yes. Naruto answered. The ball of chakra vanished, as Seiko took a deep breath. How young were you when you first started? I was 7 years old. Seiko's eyes widened slightly. So young. So, it's like some kind of military formed, right? What rank were you? Naruto's head lowered looking like that he was looking down at his hands. Anbu. Not ever hearing such a word like that, she had no clue how high that rank was. How high is that rank? It's pretty high. Anbu are high-level shinobi that work for the leader of their village, which is the Hokage. As Anbu were always assigned very high-ranking missions from the Hokage themselves. The missions were assassination, capture, escort, or infiltration. We would always work in teams. Seiko narrowed her eyes. I see. Seiko was wishing his eyes weren't so bad that way she could get a good look of his eyes. Who were your teammates? Naruto kept acting like he was staring at his lap. I wasn't really specifically assigned a permanent team. They always had me hop from one team to a different one. Although, I was partnered up with a woman quite a bit that had. He lifted his head up acting like he was facing her, the same kind of hair like yours. Her name was Yugao Azuki and she was a lot older than I. But, even though she was older than me by 10 years, I still found her rather attractive. That purple hair made her look so beautiful and she was very mature. Even though there were times when she made me do a few things that was pure torture to me. Seiko slightly blushed seeing how he resembled her as one of his partners. It was like he was telling her what he thought of her. Silence roamed the room for a short time. What time is it? The blonde asked. It's a little after 4 in the morning. Naruto sighed. I'm going to get some sleep. Seiko smiled slightly. Okay. She began to wonder where she would sleep since almost everything was taken. Shido's group were still in the downstairs room doing God knows what. Takashi and Kota took the couches in the living room, while Saya took the other couch that was in a different room. Rei and Shizuka shared the bed that was in the same room as Saya's. Kaji and Yuki shared the pallet that Naruto once rested after passing out in the bus. She sat on the bed overthinking if there was anything else besides the floor, but her thoughts were cut off, as she felt a hand grabbing her wrists. She looked up at the blonde, as he slowly leaned down bringing her down with him. Her eyes just kept staring at his bandaged-covered eyes. The blonde rested his head on the pillow, while Seiko lied next to him. Her lips formed into a smile, as she cuddled up against him and once she got comfortable, she closed her eyes. Ah, Yugao-san, Naruto called out. The purpled hair Anbu turned to see a rather happy blonde, Naruto. The blonde came to a stop in front of her with a smile on his face. I was wondering. Can you help train me with a sword? Watching you is amazing. Yugao slightly blushed. Come on Yugao-chan, he begged. Yugao then took him up on his wish. Okay. But, Naruto's smile widened even more. Yes. Yes. Yugao raised her voice, but. The blonde quieted down and looked back at her. I will not make it easy. Got it. Naruto gave her thumbs up. Yes ma'am. A couple days later. The sound of metal clanging against one another was echoing through the forest outside of Konoha. Yugao and Naruto were deep in the forest practicing their swordsmanship. The two of them both wore their normal Anbu outfit, but without the mask on. Naruto swung his sword downward at his partner, but Yugao easily blocked it by holding her sword horizontally. She overpowered the block and pushed him back a bit, as she attempted to stab his chest. The blonde swung his sword down at hers and managed to throw her off. However, she stepped on his sword, which caused him to lose his grip on it. Naruto looked down at his sword then back up at Yugao and saw her grinning. The blonde took a couple steps back and waved his hands out in front of him, while Yugao followed him with her sword in her grasp. Why Yugao-chan, you kind of made me. Yugao swung her sword horizontally lined up with his neck, but Naruto managed to duck on time. Hey. You almost killed me. Yugao didn't say anything and instead, she swung her sword vertically, which was lined up right in the middle of his body. Naruto jumped back a bit to avoid it. You're really trying to kill me. Once again, Yugao didn't say a word. Naruto took one last step back and bumped into something. He lifted his head up to see that he had bumped into a tree. Quickly, he looked back at Yugao to see that she was about to attack him again. The blonde's body jumped a bit, to see that his partner tried to cut him in half again, but the blonde spun himself around her. He made a run for his sword, but then he was roughly tackled. The two bodies rolled around the ground, but then they shortly came to a stop with Naruto lying on the ground, while Yugao was on top of him. The blonde tilted his head up a bit and by looking far up, he could see his sword in reach. He quickly tried to grab it, but Yugao grabbed both his wrists and pinned them down on each side of him. Naruto was starting to not like how she wasn't giving him a chance and frowned slightly. Yugao-chan, this isn't. The blonde stopped what he was saying, as he looked up at her eyes, chocolate brown eyes. Naruto just lied there seeing her beautiful looks with the sun's rays lighting around her head. The light from the sun was what was making her look even more attractive. Her ruby-colored lips, her gorgeous purple hair, and her brown eyes were what the blonde was examining. Yugao lowered herself, as Naruto leaned his head up slowly. The gap between them slowly began to close, but right when Naruto was getting ready to kiss her, he felt a sword stab his left leg. Yugao grinned and hopped off him on time before the blonde managed to scream in pain to where it would have driven her nuts. Naruto's upper body jolted up and looked at Yugao. What the hell? Yugao chuckled slightly. You should never fall into the temptation when it comes to a situation like that. If you were actually in a sword fight with a woman and she was in my position, she would have had you in the palm of her hand like I did. And instead of just injuring you, she would just kill you instantly. Naruto sighed and crossed his arms, as he looked to his right not wanting to look at her. Whatever. Yugao giggled at the irritated blonde. Naruto's body woke up, but his eyes still couldn't open due to the bandages. His upper body leaned up and could feel someone else next to him. He then remembered what happened last night and smiled weakly. Hearing her still sound asleep was what made him smile, as he quietly got out of bed. He felt pretty good since he got to open up to someone a bit. Reaching for the knot that kept the bandages placed, he untied it and let them fall freely. The blonde took a deep breath, hoping that what he was about to do would actually work. He opened his eyes and felt absolutely nothing, except the slightest of air brushing against them. Looking down at himself, he realized that he was still shirtless and that his pants were completely ruined. A sigh escaped his lips, as he quickly glanced back at the still sleeping Seiko. He walked out the door and quietly closed it once he was out. The blonde then headed for the restroom in need of a warm shower. Ever since he had woken up in that alley, he hasn't really had a time at all to relax and clean up. When he was walking down the hall, realized that it was quiet, which meant that everybody was still asleep. Once he turned a corner, a couple girls quietly followed him. When those two came to the corner, they both quietly peeked around it to see that the blonde stepped into the bathroom. The two girls stepped around the corner and walked to the bathroom. They then placed their ears against the door to hear the shower being turned on. The girls looked at one another. Did you see his body? Oh my god, I can't believe he even rejected me last night. Yuki said, as she placed her ear against the door again to hear the sound of a door being closed, which meant that Naruto was in the shower and was completely nude. The image of him being nude appeared in Yuki's mind. Yuki was still wearing her black and red lace bra and black panties. Well, I'm glad he rejected you, because I want him. Saya answered. Yes, Saya. Shockingly, Saya actually fell into such a level. She wore black extremely short shorts that were a little tight for her and also wore a blue tank top that didn't cover her belly button. Even though when she was around the others, she didn't show that she had a thing for the blonde. However, when it came to Yuki, for some reason, she wasn't afraid to show it around her. Yuki grabbed the knob and turned it to verify that he didn't lock it. She didn't open it, but she looked back at Saya. Should we go in? What are you two doing? The two girls yelped, as they both looked behind them to see Takashi. Saya couldn't find a way out of this. Yuki realized that the boy was still dozy and let go of the knob. Saya and I here were just talking. That's all. Takashi rubbed his eyes. Okay, but please keep it down. Yuki quickly grabbed Saya's hand and walked off. We will. She replied. Takashi watched the two leave and let out a yawn. He knocked on the door. Who's in there? Naruto heard the knock at the door and decided not to answer since he was enjoying the warm water pouring down on his skin. He grabbed a washcloth and a bar of soap. Placing the soap on the cloth, he began to rub the cloth all around the soap to where it soaked in the suds. He placed the soap aside, as he began to wash his entire body with the cloth. Another knock came from the door. Hello. Naruto rolled his eyes. It's Naruto. I'll be done in a second. Oh, no need. I was just wondering who was in there. Takashi replied. Naruto closed his eyes, since the warm water was making his body feel a bit too relaxed. 20 minutes later, the blonde turned the water off, finally thinking that he was in there long enough. He opened the door and grabbed a nearby towel. Stepping out, he dried his hair followed up by his face and then he wrapped the towel around his lower body. Quickly slipping his sandals back on, he walked out the door and left it open. Little did he remember, he left behind his pants that are laying on the floor. After finishing his shower, his muscles no longer ached. The blonde came to a stop remembering something yesterday. It was before he went out to fight off the horde. Naruto ticked and stormed to the stairs remembering a certain group he told to get lost. In a matter of seconds, the blonde came upon the room that Shido and his group is in. Kicking the door open, he saw that Shido and the others were sound asleep. He cocked an eyebrow, but then he didn't care if they were or not. Get up. A couple of them groaned and slowly moved. Get up. This time, the rest of the group woke up and were startled from the outburst. They all looked at the doorway to see the blonde. What? Shido asked. Have you all forgotten? What did I tell you all yesterday? Naruto questioned. Shido's eyes slowly began to fully open and stumbled to his feet. Are you kidding? You can't just throw survivors out like that. We all have to stick together. I'm not going to argue on this. You know why I'm making you leave, so quit trying to act like as if I don't know what you're trying to do. Naruto said. Where are we going to go? Shido continued to ask more questions. Naruto cupped his chin. Let's see. I'm sure that these other houses near us are clear. Why don't you claim one for you and your group? Why can't we just? Because I'm not going to let you try and have the others killed like you intended on with Kaji. Shido this time was at a loss of words. Now go. Naruto ordered. Sonoda was the first to walk out, followed up by the others. Shido remained where he was, but then he walked out. Naruto slammed the door shut and walked up the stairs behind Shido to make sure that his group actually was going to leave. Takashi and Koda were talking to each other in the living room, but it came to a quick stop when they saw Sonoda and the rest of Shido's group walking by. Once Shido walked by, they saw Naruto right behind them. Hey, Naruto. Takashi called out. The blonde ignored him and escorted the group full of misguided people to the door. Sonoda opened the door, as they all began to walk out one by one. When it came down to Shido, the teacher stopped once he stepped foot outside and turned to Naruto, but the blonde roughly shoved him out. Naruto stepped out and slammed the door shut, as he walked past them all to the gate. He slid the gate open. Get lost. The blonde demanded. One by one, Shido's group walked out. The door opened, as Takashi came rushing out. Naruto, what the hell? The blonde didn't turn to face him and instead kept an eye on the group making sure they didn't try anything. They can take care of themselves. Why are you kicking them out? They're humans just like us. Everyone that's alive needs to stick together. Naruto smirked. You're sounding like Shido now. Well, he's right. You can't just let them leave. Unless you want to end up like a mindless fool like them and want to die, I suggest you shut up and listen to me. Takashi cocked an eyebrow. Then tell me why you're kicking them out. I'm kicking him out for the sake of you and the others. Naruto answered, as he closed the gate and walked back to the house. They wouldn't have killed us though. Takashi said, as he walked in after Naruto. The blonde walked into the living room with Takashi right behind him. Okay, maybe you're right. But they would leave you behind to die, which is the same as killing you. Naruto stated, as he plopped onto a chair. Kota was curious of what was going on and decided to jump in. What happened? Takashi kept his full-on attention at the blonde, which had his eyes closed. Naruto here kicked out Mr. Shido and his group out. Kota let out an HMPH, good, I hate Mr. Shido. He would always pick on me in school. Takashi then snapped his attention to the shorter boy. How can you say that? We need to help anyone that's alive to remain alive. Naruto kept his eyes closed. Tell me, Takashi. Would you rather stay here with us and remain alive, or would you rather be with them and end up being left behind to die? Takashi. Kota, Takashi, and even Naruto opened his eyes, as they all saw Rei standing in her pajamas. He deserved to get kicked out. He's an asshole. Naruto smiled and closed his eyes again, glad to see that you and Kota agree. Miyamoto-san is right. Takashi and Kota saw Nurse Shizuka wrapped in nothing but a bath towel join in. Kota, however, had an instant nosebleed to see that the towel could hardly contain those jugs of hers. Takashi, on the other hand, blushed madly. I never liked Mr. Shido. He was always a rude teacher back at school. Naruto got up from his seat, which Shizuka and Rei's eyes were instantly glued to the blonde's body. He walked out the living room and to the door, while everyone just watched him. Where are you going? Kota decided to ask. The blonde opened the door. I'm going to get some clothes. He answered, as he stepped out and closed the door behind him. Takashi grunted. I'm afraid that he's going to end up being trouble. The others looked at the boy. Why? Rei asked. I think he's going to brush us off later on. I don't think Naruto-san would do such a thing. Shizuka said. Think about it. We have no idea where he came from and he shows up at the school out of nowhere. Doesn't that seem strange? And why would he even help us? He doesn't even know us. Well, maybe Naruto-san is one of those guys that like to help those in need. Shizuka stated. Yeah, Naruto-san is fairly strong and I don't see why he won't want to help us. Kota mentioned. That might be, but I just think that something's up. Takashi said. Just outside the living room, Seiko was leaned up against the wall and had listened to everything that transpired. Naruto landed outside the gate. The blonde just didn't feel like opening it since it would take more time, which is why he decided to jump over it. He walked out to the bloody street and looked at both sides to see the walls he had made last night. Looking back out from where he had finished off the last and yet strange walker, he saw his sword lying there. Quickly appearing next to his sword, he picked it up and walked over to the wall to his right. The wall he was going to was the wall that blocked the path from where they all came from. He was now standing in front of the wall and looking up at it. Naruto. The blonde looked behind him to see Kaji. What is it? Let me come with you. Naruto shook his head. You stay here with them. Why? I follow you since you saved my life. Not this time. Kaji's body twitched. What? The blonde was now completely gone, before Kaji could even get an answer. Naruto appeared on the other side of the wall and could see the smoke coming from within the city up ahead. This poor world's going to come to an end if this keeps up. He thought to himself, as he began to walk down the street that would take him into the city. Kota sat on the couch playing with the guns he had discovered in the safe from last night. Takashi was in the kitchen looking for something to eat and or make for the others. Opening the fridge, he didn't quite find much in it. He closed the fridge and stood straight back up, but as he turned to look in the pantry, he spotted Seiko with a frown on her face standing there wearing the same apron. Morning, Busujima-san. However, even though Takashi was trying to be friendly, Seiko still kept the same frown. After overhearing the boy in the living room earlier, she began to think a little less of him. After all, Naruto wasn't even there, and plus, he even saved everyone from being overrun last night. If he hadn't done so, then they wouldn't be here after all. They more than likely would have took the Humvee that was out in the driveway, or if they couldn't make it to that on time, then they would all be dead. Takashi, why are you assuming Naruto-san is a bad person? Takashi sighed in annoyance. I'm not trying to say that he is. I'm just saying that I wouldn't fully trust him. Even though he saved Kaji at school and saved us from last night, I still think something's up. Seiko then remembered the event from last night of how the blonde explained things of where he came from. I don't know how much longer I'm going to stick around. She remembered that statement specifically and then reminded herself to have another chat with the blonde later. Where is he, by the way? Takashi sighed. He said he was going to get some clothes. Seiko's eyes widened slightly. Where exactly? I don't know. More than likely somewhere in town since he went outside. Seiko's frown formed into a sadder look. Please don't leave us, Naruto-san. She hoped. Naruto found himself standing in front of a clothing store that actually turned out to not be too far from the household. The blonde has only been walking for about half an hour. Luckily, he hasn't ran into any of the dead, yet. He saw that the doors to the store were forced open and also saw glass everywhere. What caught his attention even more was the blood on the ground as well. A gust of wind came from his right, which caused his hair to blow with it. His upper body began to shiver from the impact of it, which he then walked in wanting to find some proper clothing. Once he was inside, he saw clothes racks that were knocked down all over. Taking in his surroundings, he walked to one of the racks and realized that this one was full of men's shirts. His eyes roamed around the rack, but then they glued onto a gray-colored, short-sleeved shirt. Dropping his sword to the ground, he grabbed it and quickly threw it over his head. Pulling it down his body, he realized that his muscles seemed to show through the shirt. He shrugged and began walking through the store looking for some boxers. He came to a shelf that consisted of what he was looking for. Grabbing one of the sealed packages, he tore it open and grabbed a pair of black boxers. Looking around to make sure the coast was clear, he unwrapped the towel and slid on the boxers. He threw the towel over his left shoulder and continued his search, but this time, for some pants. It didn't take long for what he was looking for, but instead of finding pants, he found something else that he has never seen before. He found a rack full of jeans, but he didn't know what they were called. Curious of how they would feel, he grabbed a pair and slid his legs through them. He lifted them up and zipped the zipper up, followed by buttoning them together. In his opinion, they felt rather comfortable. Now, he went walking around looking for what he always likes to wear, a jacket. Quick, gather the money and let's get out of here. Naruto turned to the source of the voice and saw a group of people coming into the store. They all rushed to where the register was, as one of them easily busted it open. It was a group of 4 people, all of them wearing ski masks. They all had a crowbar in their hands, while 2 of them had flashlights. One of the guys shined his flashlight around and came to a stop, as it revealed the blonde. "Hey, come here," the man ordered, which the other 3 looked at their partner and saw that he was shouting at someone. They looked where the flashlight shined and saw the blonde standing there. The one that broke open the register took a couple steps towards the blonde's position. "Get over here." Naruto blinked slowly with the same bored expression on his face. Curious of what they wanted him for, the blonde walked over to the group. As Naruto came up to the group, the guy that broke the register walked up to the blonde face to face. "Hand over all the money you got, boy." The blonde cocked an eyebrow. "Why would you need money if your world's coming to an end?" My world." The man looked at the blonde's eyes. "Wait, what's with your eyes?" The other 3 were curious when their partner pointed out the blonde's eyes and all decided to join in. They all looked closely at the boy's eyes. "Wow, I've never seen eyes like those." Gunshots were being fired off just outside the store, which drew everyone's attention. They couldn't quite see from inside, as the group rushed outside, except Naruto. Once those 4 were outside, Naruto could hear more gunshots going off. Naruto held out his hand, as his sword came back into his hand. He looked over at the counter where the register was and spotted some strange jacket that he had never seen before. The color of it is black, and not to mention that it was sleeveless. Once he grabbed the jacket, he realized that it felt smooth and rather cool feeling. He quickly put the jacket on and walked out the store. The blonde came to a stop to see an army of the dead that had managed to come out of nowhere. That wasn't all he was seeing though, but he also saw that there's a massive group of living people. He examined closely and saw that these guys were enjoying killing them off. Hearing laughter from them was a bit strange to the blonde. The people fighting the army of dead all either had some type of gun, but those that didn't have firearms were using close combat weapons such as baseball bats, pipes, etc. "Kill them all," a guy shouted. Naruto stood there with his sword tightly in his hand. The scene before him just kept reminding him of how the army of Zetsus just kept on coming. The group of living was falling one by one. The blonde's attention came to a man that had been tackled to the ground by a couple of the walkers. The man screamed in pain, as the walkers all began to tear his stomach open and pull out his organs. The others witnessed the man being torn apart, which caused a few of them to run away. Some stayed and wanted to kill them all since they pretty much went psycho. Before the blonde's eyes, several of the walkers slowly came towards him. His grip tightened on the handle of his sword, as he took a couple steps toward the oncoming horde. Location: Fujimi Airport. Not sure if that's the name to be exact. Beasts obliterated. 2 people lied on top of a small building. One is a tanned female with purple hair and wore a black combat suit with a bulletproof vest. Also, she is shown to be wearing a white choke collar along with shooting glasses. The woman stood up and grabbed her breasts. Phew. A man that wore the same 1st Squadron police uniform as the woman, which consists of a full body suit, knee and elbow pads, and a bulletproof vest. He also wears a white cap. He has a scar just above his right eye. The man looked at her. What are you doing? The woman stretched her arms out. I wasn't able to get any sleep this morning. So I was starting to feel numb. The man grinned. I can give you a massage if you'd like, Rika. If you can shoot better than me, then sure. The man held his arms out. Then count me out. Don't be ridiculous. Weren't you the one who was inducted into the best 5 of all the police officers in the country? Tajima. Anyway, we're not allowing ships to dock, but people can leave the offshore airport. Rika mentioned. Is it because of the new regulations? Yeah, blame the people up top. The indispensable engineers who were in charge of the airport maintenance are returning home to their families in droves. Anyone could leave next. Who knows what would have happened if we hadn't come along? They would have been fucked. Tajima mentioned. We have enough hands for now, but it'll only last for so long. We haven't been able to do much damage to those monsters. And since Hokkaido and Kyushu airports are starting to accept passengers again, we may have to send some support to strengthen their defenses. Rika said. But we don't have an unlimited supply of ammunition. Rika smiled. Are you going to run away? Tajima kept a straight face. No, not yet. Rika kept the same smile on. I'm going to go to the city eventually. What? You got a boyfriend or family members there or something? Rika removed her vest and then began to unzip her suit. When her suit came unzipped, she revealed to wear a white sports bra. I have a friend there. Achoo. Bless you, Marikawa-san, Kota said. Thank you. Shizuka now was wearing brown hot pants with her white shirt. Takashi just stood in the living room and took quick glances at the sleeping girl that he had saved from last night. She has shoulder-length pink hair with bangs reaching down from the side of her temples stretching outwards, burgundy-colored eyes, a mole under her left eye, and wears a white headband on her head. She was wearing a white jacket, a pink dress top and a light blue skirt, black socks and shoes. Rei looked at her childhood friend and began to worry. She was now wearing her school uniform again, but she stopped wearing the black, thigh-high socks she had on and replaced them with knee and elbow pads. The brunette realized ever since Naruto had sent Shido's group out, that her childhood friend has been rather frustrated lately. She walked over to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. Takashi. The boy didn't say anything and kept an irritated look on his face. Taka. The boy snapped his head to look at her. What? Rei jumped a bit, but then her worried look turned into an angry expression. You need to stop worrying about Mr. Shido. He would have killed us if him and the others were to continue staying with us. And how would you know? They're alive just like we are, and I'm sure he would have wanted to stick together and live. Did you not hear what happened to Kaji? Mr. Shido almost killed him. She's right, Kaji said, as he joined in, while everyone turned to face him. Kaji still wore his school uniform. I was running behind because I managed to drop my books, but when I started to catch up to them, I tripped and sprained my ankle. I fell and somehow slid far enough to end up right below him. I asked him to help, but he just looked down at me and said that the weak don't deserve to live. That's when he kicked my face and left me behind. Seiko had managed to hear the conversation going on and walked into the living room. She wore female battle boots with heels, long lace purple stockings, purple gloves, her school uniform top, a skirt that shows the string of her thong in her entire right thigh, and a special belt to hold her sword. Since she managed to hear everything, she decided to chip in. Takashi. Naruto kicked them out to protect us. I don't see why you're upset with him. Takashi remained quiet, while absorbing everything being said from the others. Yeah. Why are you upset with him? Rei asked. Takashi sighed. I just. What? Do you think that Naruto would end up kicking us out? Ray asked. Kota and all the others eyed him curious of what his answer is. No, he won't. Everyone turned their attention out to the hallway to see Yuki in her school uniform. I was in Mr. Shido's group since it all started at school. I felt for his foolish words, and then, I saw him leaving students behind for their death. Flashback. Screaming rained the halls and classrooms. Student and teachers stormed down the halls trying to find a way out of the school. When the announcement was made and the person that had made the announcement ended up screaming for their life through the intercom, which is what caused this massacre. Students were being shoved aside, attacked by others. It was just a disaster. Yuki was trying her best to get past the wave of students, but then she was instantly knocked down. Her back hit the wall pretty hard, and when someone stepped over her legs, the person's knee accidentally hit her across the head. The hit was rough, but it didn't completely knock her out. The hall began to die down, while Yuki sat there and looked at the direction she came from. She saw someone slowly walking and that the person was covered in blood. The person was groaning and she spotted a student with Mr. Shido running from that person. Mr. Shido, it's going to catch up to us. The student mentioned. The teacher looked back at the person. You're right. Which is why, Shido tripped the student and watched how he ended up going face first to the floor. You'll buy me some time. The teacher decided to walk. The boy tried to get up, but was pinned to the ground, as the person he was running from began to rip open his body. Shido looked down to his left to see a girl sitting against the wall. He grinned seeing that it was the sexy Yuki Miku. He knelt down. Yuki, come with me. We will get out of here together, he said, as he placed his hand on her thigh and began rubbing up and down. Shido stood up and held his hand out to her. Yuki had no expression after seeing how he used a student to buy him some time. She was still a bit out of it after taking a hard hit to her head. Looking up at him, she took his hand, as the two of them began to walk away looking for an exit. End of flashback. Naruto did the right thing by sending them off on their own, Yuki said. Takashi sighed and scratched his head. Okay. I just can't help but think that there's something up. Naruto swiftly spun around one of them, and in the process, he managed to cut the body in half, followed up by decapitating another one. He stood straight up to see that there was just no end to them. The group of living was decreasing immensely. The people that stayed to fight weren't showing any sign of leaving. They all laughed like maniacs, even those that were being torn apart went down laughing. Naruto stood there watching the dead devouring the living. Just in a matter of seconds, the blonde was the only one left. The dead managed to take out every last one of the living. Naruto looked at the direction from where he came from and saw that there was another road that led to a different route. He looked closer and saw that there was a bridge with a pond just below it. Perfect. I'll just lure them to the bridge and knock them all over. Naruto spun one of the dead around and grabbed it by the back of the head. Shinra Tensai. The force was so strong that Naruto still had the head in his hand, but the body was completely gone. The blood from the head poured out of it and onto the street, which would attract the other ones that at a good distance. The blonde grinned and began running toward the bridge with the massive horde right behind him. Time: 6:58 p.m. Oni-chan, the little girl that Takashi saved, shouted. The boy looked at her. Yes, Alice. The little girl's stomach then began to growl. I'm hungry. I think we all are. But Busujima-san should be about done with dinner. Actually, you can all come in now. It's ready, Seiko called out. Everyone's ears perked up and they all rushed to the kitchen. Since it's been a couple days since the breakout started, they were all focusing on surviving then having to feed their bodies. Once everyone came into the kitchen, they saw bowls and a pair of chopsticks sitting on the counter, one for everyone. Every single one of them, except Seiko, dashed to the bowl and grabbed the chopsticks. Since it's been a while since they've actually eaten, their reaction that they displayed would be expected. They all looked into the bowl. Chicken ramen. It looks delicious, Ray mentioned. Seiko smiled, as she grabbed her own bowl. Thank you. Naruto stood on the railing of the bridge and looked at the sunset. Earlier, he had managed to knock all the dead over and into the pond. They couldn't swim and eventually all drowned. The wind started to pick up and he needed to get back home before it got dark. He jumped back off the railing and onto the road. The road he stood on began to have mini quakes. He looked down to see that the road wasn't opening, but then he looked to his right and saw a couple of giant mutated walkers. They stood at about 10 feet tall and were completely buff. The arms were all muscle, and it wasn't just like any ordinary arm with muscle, but their arms were just complete muscle and disgustingly huge. The legs were also wide in muscle, but they were nowhere near as big as the arms. Their heads were a normal size for any human being, but their eyes were completely yellow. What the hell? Naruto asked himself. The two giants charged at him like a couple of buffalo. They closed in on the blonde and attempted to slam their fists down on him, but the blonde easily jumped back to avoid them. He flipped his sword in his hand to where he held it backwards, and once his feet hit the ground, he charged at the two with incredible speed. In a flash, he appeared behind the two giants, as blood shot out in the air. He ended up cutting them in the stomach, which took a form of an X. Just as he turned around, he was hit hard against the gut and sent soaring back. His back hit the ground rather roughly and ended up sliding a few feet. When he came to a stop, he leaned up and saw the giants coming at him again. Since his assault didn't work, he knew that he was going to have to start cutting off their arms or legs. The giants closed in, and like last time, they attempted to smash him, but Naruto spun around them and attempted to cut their legs off. However, that didn't quite happen. Their muscle was immensely massive that it was too hard to cut through. Naruto looked up at the giants and was instantly kneed up against his chin. The blonde was sent in the air, and due to how hard the impact was, he was forced to let go of his sword. The giant grabbed the blonde's ankle before he was too high to reach and then slammed him hard on the ground. A sharp pain shot throughout his back, and then he coughed up some blood. The giant let go of him and attempted to punch down at him, but the blonde vanished in a swirl of leaves. Just a few yards away, Naruto reappeared with a little trail of blood coming from the corner of his lips. The other giant charged at the blonde, while Naruto held out his arms and formed a Rinnegan in each hand. Quickly jumping over the incoming giant, the blonde dropped behind it and slammed both Rinnegan's on its back. It managed to cause the giant to go sliding forward, but it didn't last long, as it stopped itself. Naruto cocked an eyebrow. What the hell is with? The other giant came from behind the blonde and punched down at his head, but Naruto vanished once again. The blonde reappeared right where he had dropped his sword, which he quickly picked it back up. Looking at where he once was, he saw the two giants looking around for him. He swung his sword horizontally, which ended up shooting a powerful gust of wind towards them. The wind caused the two giants to stumble a bit, but then they both glanced to where it came from and saw their target. They charged towards him, while Naruto flipped his sword once again to where he held it backwards. Seeing how the giants were at a good distance from him still, Naruto had enough and held out his free hand facing the first one, Bansho Tenin. The giant out in front came hurling towards the blonde. Its arms and legs were useless, and since Naruto saw that it was close enough, he flicked his wrist down, which caused the giant to hit the ground face first right in front of him. Naruto quickly lined his sword up with its neck, and with a quick swing, he decapitated it. Since he couldn't find anything else to work, he easily removed its head. He knew that there was several other ways to get rid of it, but he wanted to continue working on his swordsmanship. Quickly looking up ahead, he saw the other one just about to pounce on him. The last one tried to smash down on the blonde's head, but Naruto easily shifted to the side. The blonde jumped up with some speed and quickly appeared behind the giant. He whipped his sword to the side, as blood hit the ground. The blonde stood there with a bored look on his face, as he heard a thump hit the ground. Turning around, he saw the giant's head lying there and then saw the body fall next. So, beheading them seems to be the only trick with swordsmanship, he said to himself, and then realized that it was completely dark now. He looked up and saw that half of the moon lit the area. Naruto's typical straight bored lips slowly turned into a saddened frown, whereas everyone. He looked around the area to see all the corpses lying around. A sigh escaped his mouth, as he sealed his sword away and began to head back to the others. Thank for listening. Do hope you enjoy. If you guy enjoyed, if you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notifications, and also check out the other videos that have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.